Hi, everyone. This is Kristen. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We're talking with Andrea and Steve about their representatives from the FDA, and they'll be going over patient programs and all the opportunities that the FDA has to offer. I urge everyone to leave where you're from, what you advocate for, and your name in the chat box. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free to chat them in that chat box, and we'll be getting to your questions at the end of the presentation. But feel free to just, leave any questions you have, and we'll get to them at the end. So I am going to turn it over to Andrea and Steve.
Much. This is Steve Morin and Andrea Furia-Helms, and we are so excited that you guys are here with us, and hopefully we provide a lot of answers. And if you have questions after, please let us know. We'll begin now. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of an outline of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go over quickly about the FDA, the structure, the mission. We're going to talk about our office. We're in the Office of Health and Constituent Affairs, and what we do. We're going to talk about that, the value of the patient voice adds to our work here. We're also going to talk about patient engagement, and those are some of the areas. I'm not going to read them off because we're going to discuss. And then after, some challenges to meaningful engagement. So first of all, I think it's really important to make sure you guys understand what our mission here at the FDA is. And we're a public health agency, and we're here to ensure the safety, effectiveness, and security of human and animal drugs, as well as biological products and medical devices. And we also ensure that safety of foods, cosmetics, radiating-emitting products, and tobacco products as well, which is our newest center. And I believe that was in 2007 that was created. Next slide. One more. Yes. So the FDA, we regulate about $2 trillion worth of products every year. So what does that mean? It means when you wake up in the morning and you brush your teeth, you put your contact lenses in, you maybe microwave your breakfast or your coffee, you take your medicine, you feed your pet, put some sunscreen on. In the evening, you go grocery shopping, and maybe you had to have a flu shot or a mammogram that day. Those are all products that we regulate and make sure that they are safe and effective for each of you. So what it averages is about 20 cents on every dollar you spend is on some products that we are making sure are safe for you and each of you. Next slide, please. So with that oversight comes some major responsibilities. I believe we have over 16,000 employees working at the FDA. That's not just here in White Oak, which is Silver Spring, Maryland. That's throughout the world. We have about 250,000 registered facilities. About 50% of those are overseas. We regulate over 14,800 prescription drug products, over 5,800 categories of medical devices, over 1,600 FDA-approved animal drug products, as well as over 300 FDA biologic products, and 4,800 currently regulated tobacco products. And those numbers are from about a year ago, so those are probably a little higher now. I think it's also important to understand our structure. The image you see right here is our current commissioner, Dr. Robert Califf. He has been with us for almost a year, and you can see the structure. We're in the little box to the right with the Office of Health and Constituent Affairs. I'm not going to give you more about this boring slide, but I just want to let you see where we are. And this is our office. Our office is actually separated into two different areas. There's a healthcare professional side, as well as a patient liaison side. And this is our current patient liaison team. And you can see Andrea and I on the, I guess it would be your left side, possibly. I don't know how it's displaying, but that is us right there. And we're the people that answer patient calls. And we're the ones who are responsible for patient advisory committees and try to work with patients and healthcare providers, as well as caregivers. Next slide. Thank you. So within the FDA, this is who our office works with. So there are 7 centers. We work with the Center for Tobacco Products, Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. And within that office, there's also another patient engagement office called PACES. And we work with them very closely. There's the Center for Biologic Evaluation and Research, and you can see all the acronyms underneath. We have the Center for Devices and Radiological Health. We also work with foods, the Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, as well as 2 other offices, the FDA Office of Minority Health and the FDA Office of Women's Health. We cut across all the entire centers, and we make sure that we're on top and working with each office. Next slide. So why is the patient voice important? Well, you all know that, but sometimes it's nice to put it into words and to hear it. So we here feel that patients provide insight on issues, problems, and or questions that are important to you and your family members. We feel that you have a vested interest in diversity of opinions. And you all have varying perspectives. You are not at the same place in your diseases or your family's diseases. So we want to make sure we understand what risk and tolerance and benefits you guys are willing to take. When you're first diagnosed with the disease, you might be willing to take more risk than you are later in life when your disease is a little more critical. So we need to understand and put that into perspective when we're working with patients. It also provides a human element. It provides your judgment. And, as scientists over here, we oftentimes, can become very clinical, and you help us keep that in check. What value might be added by patient engagement? Well, we feel that if you're engaged with us as well as with industry, there could be faster recruitment and improved retention and trials. What does that mean? Well, if we're meeting what patients find to be the most important, patients might sign up for those clinical trials quicker. Because we recruit patients a little bit quicker, we might actually decrease the amount of cost that a drug takes to develop. We also help develop meaningful endpoints and measurements, as well as medical products that are better reflected outcomes and quality of life measures. The things that are important to you can help make those trials more important and meet your needs better. Next slide, please. So we developed the FDA Patient Network, and this is a little bit out of order, but we created it in 2012. And the reasons why is because, through some of our various programs, we interact with the public, and we figured, if people don't have information, don't know how to understand regulations and understand how drugs and devices are developed, well, they can't have meaningful participation. So we wanted to make sure that all of the information we provide to the FDA Patient Representative Program, which you'll hear in a few minutes, we wanted to make sure that information was available to the public. So we created this program, which is a web-based program that helps to educate patients and their communities about the FDA, as well as increase communications with patients and their community. So we decided to broaden the opportunities for patient engagement with this network. And one of the most important things was to educate. I and my team and my colleagues and everybody here, we want to make sure people understand how they can participate here. So we made sure that there are various pages, which I'm not going to discuss this slide because I'm going to go into more depth in a few slides. So next slide. So here's the patient network. We're made up of a biweekly email newsletter that goes out to patient caregivers, whoever, and it's what's been happening in the FDA. We have a website as well as webinars like this webinar we're doing today. We also have disease-specific email updates and Twitter. Next slide. So here's an example of our newsletter. On the colored bars on the side, those are the different areas where we highlight in our newsletter every week. So every 2 weeks. So we go through and myself and another colleague, Deb Miller, comb through the FDA website trying to find information that's important to patients and provide them with enough information that they either don't need to further research it, or they can click on the link and get more information. Because it might not have anything to do with your illness or your family's illness, but it might be something that you're interested in. So we try to make it a consolidated newsletter for patients and caregivers. Next slide, please. This is a picture of our homepage on the website. And on the left, again, the colored bars are the different areas where we cover. And I won't read those to you, but we've tried to provide useful information on regulations, on opportunities to comment. And next slide, please, actually. So this is one of my favorite pages. I get to read the Federal Register every day, which is the government's newspaper, if you will. Anything that we and other government agencies need or want to do, we have to post in this newspaper. And I go through it and I pick out and comb through all those things that are important to patients or caregivers. And I list them like you'll see on the slide over here. I break it down into months. And then on the months, I break it down into the days that the comments are due and provide just enough information that if you're interested, you can click on the request for comments and it will bring you to regulations.gov where you can actually input your comment on the computer. So trying to make it easier for the public to make comments and to be involved. Next slide. Thank you. This page, through the Federal Register and other resources, I go through and pull out all of the meetings that the FDA is involved in, public conferences, advisory committee meetings, and do a very similar thing where I break it down into months and then the days as well. Again, trying to make it easy for patients to either be involved in person. As soon as those meetings are posted, they're on the website. So giving you enough notice that if you want to come and participate in person, you can, or you can register to listen to it online through one of our various formats and things like that. But we feel that it's important for patients to know and understand where they can have meaningful interactions. We've also created a page on clinical trials, what patients need to know. And that's also been translated into Spanish. We talk about various things about, like clinical research versus medical. Informed consent, what does that mean? What are IRBs? And things that are sometimes confusing, but we try to make it as understandable for any person, because I know the FDA website is oftentimes written at a very high reading level. So we try to make sure it's probably an 8th or 9th grade reading level, but we can always improve. So if you're on a page and you feel like there's a better way to talk about it, please, at the end you'll see our email address. Please make sure you email me because I'm always wanting to hear feedback from patients and the public. Next slide. We also talk about other treatment options. Some of you may have heard the term expanded access. Well, what does that mean? How can I or you or a family member receive expanded access? The website talks about that. We also talk about something called off-label use, or what we call unapproved use of an approved drug. And so there's that discussion there, as well as what is an investigational drug. Next slide, please. We also list all of our webinars that we've done, and actually notice a little, oh no, sorry. All of the webinars, so whenever there are webinars, not just from our office, but from the FDA, I try to put those onto this page, so that way patients and caregivers and everybody can just go to one page and not have to get lost within our FDA website. We also talk about drug and device development, and this breaks down the steps into simplistic terms. They're more complex than what we put here, but there are links to other areas where you can then, dive into something deeper, such as preclinical research or what does an FDA review mean. So this is one of our, popular pages, and I suggest you take a look at it sometime. Next slide. These are some of our email updates. We have 4 of them right now. And one of the cardio beat is one of our popular ones and one of our newer ones. We have about 51,000 people who have subscribed to that. We also have diabetes monitor, which you can see is for endocrine issues of diabetes. We have about 51,600 subscribers. And then 2 of our older ones are hepatitis and HIV, where we have 59,000 for hepatitis and 64,000 for HIV. Next slide. We also have an FDA Facebook page that is very useful. There's a lot of great information that goes. It's updated daily. And we also can comment on some things, but being a regulatory agency, we are not always the quickest because we have to ensure our replies will be within the regulatory framework. So if you haven't liked us, please check us out on Facebook and like us. That would be a wonderful thing. Next slide. And then we have an FDA Patient Network Twitter account. You can see our Twitter handle for those of you who are typing it in, and it's also at FDA_patient_NET. It's fairly new. We started at the end of March, and we only have about 760 followers. So hopefully you all can follow us, and then also have your friends and colleagues follow us. We try to make sure that we're putting out new information, and we try to retweet as little as possible if we can, because we know that there's overload at times, and we want patients to know when we send something out that it's important. And that's it for me, and now will be Andrea.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Steve. I'm going to go over a little bit some other patient engagement opportunities and programs that we also have at FDA. And many of these fall under the patient network program that Steve just described. Some of you may be familiar with the FDA Patient Representative Program. This is a program where it began in the early 1990s, and it's so that we can recruit patients and caregivers to serve on advisory committees and to serve in review division meetings. And the purpose of having the patient voice in these meetings is that they understand the perspectives and the needs of patients and what's important to you all. So the patient voice is represented in these important discussions, and just having a patient at the table really reminds folks that this is the reason why we're doing this work. It's sort of a reminder that the end user is the patient, and that's the most important thing. So patient perspectives are represented, as I mentioned, on advisory committees and review division meetings. And the program allows for further understanding and appreciation of FDA's role in medical product development and review and patient protection. Another thing that this helps with patients understanding our process is that it also helps you all, if you advocate and you are connected to so many people, that you can sort of help people understand our role as well. Sometimes there's some misconceptions about what we can and cannot regulate. So when we educate patients and patients become more familiar about our regulatory processes, then that can trickle down through you all, and we really appreciate that. And I think it helps resolve some issues and understanding FDA's responsibilities. Currently, we have 200 patient representatives, and they represent over 300 diseases and conditions. So we continue to increase efforts to engage with patients, and it's important because we want to better understand your needs and to seek your input on what we do. And it helps us better understand the work. It helps you better understand the work we do, and it encourages engagement also with other people in the development space. So one of the things is it's not just FDA that's in this sort of development space. It's important to remember that you need to engage with researchers and industry as well. And that they're players at the table, and it's important to have discussions with them. In 2012, the FDA Safety and Innovation Act was signed into law by President Obama. And every 5 years, we have to get reauthorized to do what we do. And so the authorization in 2012 is the Safety and Innovation Act, which is also known as FDASIA. And you'll get used to hearing a lot of our acronyms for us. And one of the provisions that was in FDASIA was Section 1137. And this was a provision to really help formalize and increase patient engagement in medical product discussions in the development side of things. We were including patient representatives in development discussions, but I think this really formalized it and made it a little bit more solidified so that we could sort of push internally that it's important to have these discussions with patients. So we include the patients in medical product development discussions with the review divisions. And it also helps us explore ways of identifying patient representatives where they can have a voice in the process. So what have we done so far since 1137 has been signed into law? We formed a cross-center work group when we first, when it was first signed into law, and to discuss how should this be implemented, how should we do this? And we all decided, you know what, we really need to hear from patients and our stakeholders. I think that's the best thing to do to get direction on what do you think about how we should implement this? So we opened a docket, which is an area where Steve had talked about in the Federal Register where you can provide public comments. And we asked folks to provide comments. From those comments, we took them, analyzed them, and there was a summary report about the stakeholder views. And we can certainly share that information so that everyone can read those comments as well. So now we're in the implementation phase, and so the centers are implementing various activities in patient engagement, as we are from the Office of the Commissioner level. And since that time, we had that cross-center work group. We've sort of evolved it now, because now that we are doing a lot more patient engagement activities and there's a lot going on across the centers, now we evolved the 1137 work group to the FDA Patient Council. And this council is to coordinate and track patient engagement activities across the medical product centers. Another endeavor that we have embarked on is working more closely with the European Medicines Agency, EMA. For the last couple of years, we have been in discussions with them, and we had created a patient engagement cluster. There's various clusters already in existence in different therapeutic areas, but the agency, both FDA and EMA, thought it would be great to develop a patient engagement cluster to really talk about patient engagement on both sides of the pond and really share and learn from each other. So we share best practices involving patients and to improve our patient engagement activities. And some topics that we discuss is practices and policies in patient engagement in the medical products, different ways for engaging and involving patients and caregivers and their organizations, guidance documents and regulations. We talk about any high profile or sensitive and controversial issues that come up that are really important to patients, and experiences on challenging aspects. So another patient engagement program or initiative that comes out of the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research is called the Patient-Focused Drug Development. As I mentioned, in 2012, there was the TDASIA that was signed into law. There was also PDUFA 5, which is the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, and that was the fifth authorization for the Center for Drugs to gather perspectives on certain disease areas. So the patient-focused drug development meetings are really focused on really unmet medical needs for certain disease areas. So far, the meetings have been going on since 2013 fiscal year, and there's been 20 public meetings. And because they're ahead of schedule, which is great news, they added 4 more for the year of 2017. And there's some excellent reports that come out of these meetings that I think you all should be reading and be interested in seeing, and they're on our website. Again, we can share that information if need be, but it's called The Voice of the Patient and summarizes the meetings and the information that the patients provided in these meetings. And Devices also has their own initiative called the Patient Preference Initiative. And this has been developed to incorporate patient preference information into medical device total product lifecycle development so that they're getting information to develop devices that are patient-centric. It helps assess the benefits and risks that Steve also mentioned that's really important to FDAs to hear from patients what's important in terms of your level of risk you'd be willing to take and what's beneficial to you. Identifies the benefits and risks of the technology that's important to patients. The initiative clarifies how patients think about trade-offs of these benefits and risks, and it shows how patient preferences vary across the population. So patients will have different perspectives on these. Another opportunity that you might be interested in also is a new patient engagement advisory committee. FDA has a number of advisory committees, but we've never had one strictly for patients to serve, a whole committee of patients and caregivers and patient representatives from organizations. So the Center for Devices and Radiological Health has established this Patient Engagement Advisory Committee, which is still in development, but it was comprised to provide advice on FDA and complex issues related to medical devices, such as the regulation of devices, guidances, clinical trials, as I mentioned, benefit risk, unmet clinical needs, and quality of life in device-related issues. There's going to be a new initiative that's coming out of our office, the Office of Health and Constituent Affairs. The name is still to be determined, but we are working with the the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative, and they are out of Duke University. And we decided that it's so important to enhance and to really grow our patient engagement activities, but it's important to include patients in the process. So we're establishing a group of external patients that represent organizations and individual patients that can also be nominated to meet with FDA and city to discuss patient engagement at FDA and how we can improve our practices. So soon, and I will share this information so that everyone will get it soon, there will be a federal register notice under regulations.gov where you can submit a nomination or nominate someone else if you'd like. So that should be coming out early next year. This is just to show you some resources that we have. As Steve went over pretty thoroughly, under For Patients off the FDA.gov page, that's what Steve manages and really takes his time to get a lot of information. It's a one-stop shop for you all. It's a great place to be. The newsletter is where you can get access to it off of the For Patients page, and I highly advise you to subscribe to the Patient Network's newsletter. So that's also a one-stop shop that comes out every other week, and it comes right to your email, so you don't have to sift through the website if you don't want to. As Steve mentioned, also, please follow us on Twitter and get those numbers up.
Exactly. Please.
And we also have an email address. If you have any specific concerns, we're happy to address and help you in any way we can. And Steve was so nice to provide this slide of all these acronyms. I don't know if you want to describe it.
So just the government agencies love acronyms, and oftentimes we forget when we're talking and speaking to use acronyms. So this was just a slide to make sure that if you were going through one of them, that you have the question, what it was is there. So that's all this was.
Oh. Oh, okay. So that's all we have for you, but we're happy to take any questions, and please feel free to email us if you have anything of specific concern that you'd like to speak with us on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve and Andrea. That was really interesting. Gave a lot of insight into, the FDA and the opportunities there. We do have a few questions. Aid asks, do you have any plans to include a sickle cell newsletter?
So that's a good question. It's for individual patients right now, we don't have any plans on adding new newsletters. But as we get more and more suggestions, there's always a possibility. We do have sickle cell patient representatives who do represent the community if there are advisory committee meetings or important information. So just so you are aware, we do make sure that your community is represented with us. But that's a great suggestion. We'll look into that.
Great, thank you. The next one, how can people get involved in the Patient Engagement Advisory Committee?
So we can send information out there. I think right now the nomination period has closed, but there's going to be other nomination periods once the 2-year terms are up for the current members, whoever are going to be selected. They're in the evaluation process right now. But I'd be happy to share that information with you so that you can monitor that. And when the nomination period opens again, you can self-nominate or you can nominate someone else.
Awesome. Yeah, if you just send that information our way, we can certainly make sure everyone attending the webinar has access to that information.
Cool.
A few more. What kind of patient leaders are you guys looking for when you're looking to fill spots on committees and boards?
I'm sorry, but you didn't catch the whole thing.
Oh, sorry. What kind of patient leaders do you look for when you're trying to fill spots on different committees and boards and that sort of thing?
So there's certain criteria for specifically the patient representative program. And again, all this information and the criteria is on the For Patients page. And we encourage you to look at that criteria. But in short, we look for patients or primary caregivers you have some kind of connection in the advocacy world with your patient community so that you can not only represent your own views, but also sort of a collective voice for the patient community. One of the big issues that we have to consider for patient representatives is because they become special government employees, which is a temporary government employee status, means that they go through a conflict of interest clearance and screening just like regular government employees like Steve and I. And so that gets a little sticky because if they're, we want the patients to be involved in the community, but if they're in a sort of formal role in an organization, sometimes that could conflict them out in participating. So, but I'm happy to provide any specific information if it doesn't make sense for whatever you see on the website, because there's a lot of information there, but sometimes there's specific questions related to conflict of interest that we're happy to address. But those are the major criteria that we look for in patient representatives.
Awesome. Okay. And then looks like we have one last question. Unless anyone else has any, feel free to throw them in the chat. But Danielle asks, are there any specific informational outlets from the FDA for children's medical conditions? So looks like she's trying to focus on mental health for children with complex medical conditions. So
the one thing to remember with the FDA is that we're not allowed to practice medicine. So our newsletters and our email updates, so our email updates first are providing patients of those communities with information about safety labeling changes or new approvals. So it's not a newsletter in sense for the 4 different diseases. So we typically try to stay in the realm of approvals and safety information at the FDA, and anything for treatment of would be outside of our agency. Whether it's the CDC or the NIH or something from HRSA. So anything that would direct care of would be outside of our agency. And anything that's talking about the specific products of treatment would be sort of in here. So we I say we don't have specific pages other than rare diseases and.
Right. The only other thing I can think of is there is a pediatric advisory committee, and you know, depending on what's coming forward to be potentially approved in pediatrics, that advisory committee would be reviewing and meeting on occasion about those specific products. So maybe monitoring that page about what advisory committees are coming up in that advisory committee, the pediatric advisory committee.
All right, thank you. Next, we have Christina, and she's asking, is there a way to join both the patient network and also the patient representative program? And is there anything that they can be doing now to get involved?
So the patient network is open to all public, whether you're a doctor or you're a patient or you're just a consumer. It's open to everybody. And the newsletter is how you would sign up and get a part of that. And we list all of the meetings that you can be a part of, as well as the comments, public comments, which is where we're looking for patients and the public to put their perspective on the questions we're asking. So I would encourage you all to look over those and go on the website and kind of, you know, move around and see what we have to offer. And I'll let Andrea answer about the patient representative program.
So off of the For Patients page, there's a whole section on the patient representative program and how to apply. So you would go to that section and look at what we ask for in that application, and it's usually an email to our FDA patient rep program email address.
And also on there it says there's the ones that we're currently looking for, and if we don't have an upcoming meeting or an opportunity, or there may be some delay in us getting back to you because we have to process people that have meetings coming up. And so just know that if you apply and you don't hear a response right away, it's probably because there's not a need currently to serve right now. But we keep everybody's names on file in your applications, and as those needs come up, we then pull from those resources. Yeah, that's an important point, Steve. I appreciate that you brought that up. So just a little bit of understanding of the FDA's process. So FDA receives an application for a potential new product to be reviewed and potentially approved.
And our requests for patients to provide input are based on those applications. So unless there's a product coming forward to FDA for potential review and approval, there might not be anything in the pipeline. You know, this happens a lot in the rare disease area, although that's steadily increasing, thankfully. But so just know that we don't just recruit for any disease and all conditions. It's really based on what industry is developing and what they're submitting to FDA for an application for review and approval.
All right. Well, Andrea and Steve, thank you so much. This was very helpful. For everyone attending, we'll make sure that you do get the information. If you have any additional questions, I know Steve and Andrea both said to reach out to them, and their emails are right there. And we'll make sure to forward the additional information that they want to send out to everyone. So thank you again. Thank you, everyone, for joining. And I hope you all have a great day.